This episode is brought to you by Zarzar Law. I'm investigative journalist Molly Barrows. For years, I've covered the stories that made headlines in Northwest Florida and all along the Gulf Coast. Murders, missing persons, and mysteries of all kinds. These cases are far from over for many victims because the full story has yet to surface. Join me for Gulf Coast Confidential, where I dive into the saltier side of the South and expose the lies, greed, and corruption that often weighs down the truth. It's time to turn the tide and get a shot at justice. Hey, y'all, I'm Molly Barrows, and welcome to the Gulf Coast Confidential podcast. If you're familiar with the show, then of course you know Pam Hill, pharmacist and victims advocate, is our typical cohort in crime, if you will, partner in crime for this show. So we're happy to have you on again today, Pam. Thank you. And this is a show where we cover some pretty scandalous crimes and cases that bubble up here in Northwest Florida and beyond. We would like to remind you to like and subscribe if you haven't already. We appreciate you watching and listening wherever you like to watch, whether it's our YouTube channel or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. So please like and subscribe. Today we're talking about an episode called Carlee Russell Kidnap Hoax, 911’d, an Invisible Toddler. What's this, you say?
Yeah.
Well, you may remember Carlee Russell, a former Birmingham, Alabama nursing student. That's Pam's neck of the woods. She's from the ham, as they like to call it. And I remember when this story broke, you were all over it. Like she was missing supposedly for 2 days. She had called 911 saying she saw a toddler going down the highway. She was stopping to help. And then nobody had seen her, and her car was left behind, her purse, her cell phone, her wig.
Everything. Yeah.
And so people were like, where is she? And you were ready to go look for her.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And the next morning, I kind of drove over that way. It was over by the Galleria in Hoover area on 459. We love that big back way back from Tuscaloosa up to that part of Birmingham. And that's busy over there. And so for her to say that she saw a toddler on the side of the road on I-459 there was something else. And we're thinking human trafficking, a decoy, using a baby. And oh my gosh, and it was breaking like that. And I had high anxiety from all that, just going, what's happening? So
I know. We are going to tell you exactly what happened. Caused quite the ruckus, not just in and around Birmingham, but also the entire country. So we're going to break down what turned out to be just one big fat lie.
Big old I-459 lie.
Exactly. All right. But before we get into that, we want to update you on another story we've been following here on Gulf Coast Confidential about Dr. Thomas Shaknovsky. You may remember, if you've been following us, that he's the Destin area surgeon who is being sued for allegedly mistakenly removing a man's liver instead of his spleen. Here's a quick recap. Mr. Bill Bryan bled out on the operating table last August while vacationing with his wife in Destin. He went to the hospital with abdomen pain. The staff and the surgeon pushed him and his wife to go ahead and have surgery to remove his spleen. And according to Brian's wife and widow now, Beverly, that they gave a lot of pressure, in fact. And that's why they agreed to go ahead and do it. And then sadly, he died. And then according to this lawsuit, he lied about it to cover it up. Shaknovsky did. So we've been talking about it pretty extensively here on the Gulf Coast Confidential podcast, and we have a playlist that deals exactly with the episodes that we've done on Dr. Shaknovsky. But if you're interested in watching any of them, the titles are "That's the Effing Liver," which is a quote from one of the staff that was there when he was trying to say that the liver was the spleen in the operating room. Second episode, "Surgeon loses license after removing man's liver instead of spleen." Dr. Thomas Shaknovsky blames mistake on migrating organ, and also the third episode is lawsuit over Dr. Shaknovsky's wrong site liver surgery, Pandora's box open. So there is a lot to break down. You can watch and listen to all three of those episodes on that playlist. But if you have been following it, then you know he was working for Ascension Sacred Heart, and several nurses, as well as that doctor and Ascension, are being sued for Bill Bryan's wrongful death. So we want to have an update for you. We've got an update for you on this lawsuit, which was filed by Mrs. Bryan, Mrs. Beverly Bryan, for the wrongful death of her husband, and her attorney, personal injury attorney, Joe Zarzar from here in Pensacola, gave us an update on what's happening with that litigation that I want to share with you. And of course, it's from their perspective. And just a reminder for transparency that Joe Zarzar Law is an advertiser on this show. So just wanted to let you know that. And here is the latest on what Zarzar shared about this particular lawsuit. So according to Joe, the parties involved met to mediate a settlement in Mrs. Bryan's case, but they did not come to a resolution because he said the defendants are trying to dismiss some of the claims in the lawsuit. So this is how he broke it down for me. Besides the wrongful death and medical malpractice, Mrs. Bryan is alleging tortured interference with a dead body and intentional infliction of emotional distress. So what does that mean? Well, here's why it matters. Anything that someone does that affects a dead body, whether it delays the funeral or any action taken on the autopsy after a person dies, that is wrongful, over a wrongful death, I should say, and it can cause emotional distress and alter the natural course of the body being termed or interred, I should say, buried, or if there's some sort of interference with what happens with the autopsy, that's also considered negligent, and it's considered infliction of emotional distress in an intentional way, if you will. So emotional distress is basically based on outrageous conduct that is either done intentionally or with the intentional neglect, if you will. So infliction of emotional distress. So, he was saying, obviously, some of the things that they did that were outrageous that would have led to this emotional distress, the court has to determine whether or not that conduct is outrageous. And in this particular situation, what they're saying is outrageous and inflicting emotional distress was the covering up of this. But, essentially he had another staff patient label it a spleen and not the liver. And he was, trying to say that it migrated to the other part of the body. They, according to the lawsuit, lied to the medical examiner's office. And then also, the only time they even realized that the only person that came clean was the pathologist. He was like, I tested this. This is not spleen tissue. This is liver tissue. And then the pathologist is the one that basically threatened to go to the medical examiner with this information at the hospital. And according to Zarzar Law, they believe that is outrageous. And that's the basis for those claims. So I say all that to say this. Here's why dropping or keeping those claims is significant and why it could potentially impact this lawsuit, because it's here in Florida. So stay with me here. These claims are not subject to the medical malpractice caps that we have here in Florida. So they're basically trying to get rid of these claims that potentially carry a pretty hefty, payout, if you will, because these claims is what they're alleging occurred after Mr. Bryan's death. This would be not necessarily related to his death, but something that was, the additional trauma that came with what they did, alleging, according to this lawsuit, afterwards. The defendants are alleging in this lawsuit that these claims, those particular ones, don't belong in the medical malpractice part of the lawsuit, that they are separate counts, and they filed a motion to dismiss those claims, according to Zarzar. And he believes they're doing that because they don't want to deal with anything that's outside of the realm of the Medical Malpractice Act, because, and this is where Florida law comes in, it would subject them to a liability that other claims in Florida people are subject to. But because of Florida law, insurance companies basically are in a class by themselves. And so it would limit if they can keep that part out, then they could fall under their special class, and they could limit the cap on what the family can collect. So of course they're trying to dismiss those particular claims, is Joe Zarzar's thought. And he said he also believes this goes again to the bigger issue of what many personal injury attorneys feel is needed in this state, and that's tort reform, because the laws do cap claims. And the economic reason given for passing these laws is so that medical malpractice claims are frivolous and it ties up the courts and at any rate, causes a big financial blow and discourages people from getting the kind of care, makes it hard for doctors to practice. Poor me, if you will. But Florida is also the only state in the country that has what's called a free kill law. And essentially that limits who can sue somebody for a wrongful death or medical malpractice if the person doesn't have any dependents, if they're above a certain age and they have older children, or it has to basically be somebody who's still relying on them, a wife or children that's, relying on them to take care of them. We're not talking about the free kill law here, but that's an example of the type of laws that Florida has that limit people's ability to hold doctors accountable when they believe medical malpractice malpractice has been involved, or medical professionals. In Florida, while there are no statutory caps or economic damages in medical malpractice cases, non-economic damages are capped at $500,000 per claimant for most injuries, but cases of negligence that result in death, non-economic damages can reach $1 million. Well, that's what these are. These are intangible losses like pain, suffering, emotional distress, loss of companionship. Florida laws previously had caps on non-economic damages, but these were struck down by the Florida Supreme Court as unconstitutional, but they're doing it anyway.
Right.
There are still statutory caps on these damages, and they're still getting away with it. So, the Florida legislature supposedly passed these laws to reduce medical malpractice claims. Joe and I were talking a little bit about that, but he said, according to his research, and in fact, this Supreme Court case where they looked at it and struck down those caps, he said that's just an excuse, that Florida's medical malpractice laws exist in large part due to lobbying efforts by insurance companies to minimize their financial losses and max gains for shareholders. Quote, Joe said, they don't want to be treated like everybody else. They want to be treated like the special class the legislature has allowed them to be, end quote. And the other thing that I think is interesting is when the Supreme Court did dive into this, what they found was that these insurance companies were going to legislators and saying, gosh, we just have all these claims and it's so expensive and it makes it hard for doctors to practice. What's also happening at the same time, the way insurance companies make their money, they take those premiums that we give them and they reinvest it. And the idea being that they're going to make more money than they have to pay out in claims. Well, when their business model isn't going well, suddenly they're crying foul and saying, that we need to pass these laws in order to protect the public from these frivolous claims. But really, it's to ensure that they have better returns for their board members and their shareholders. So that's according to what came out in the Florida Supreme Court ruling that, about that. So that was one of the things that Zarzar wanted to put out and let folks know what's happening with this case. This is, in fact, one, if not the biggest, it's for sure one of the biggest medical malpractice cases in the country right now. So, not only are we talking about this case, we've been following the cases of Dr. Ben Brown. That came up as well, that he had the minimum level of insurance that he was required to carry, like, I think it was like $250,000. So there's just a lot that goes on when we cover these cases, and it's not just the headline parts of what these doctors have done. It's difficult oftentimes, as we see when you get down into the weeds of trying to have a settlement in a case like this. It seems like it would be a no-brainer.
It does.
And at some point I'm sure they will settle, but this is part of what drags it on and what makes it interesting is that they're working within the laws of Florida, which basically give insurance companies a lot of protections.
A lot of laws are written like that to give the people almost carte blanche to do some of their tomfoolery. And then when a normal person goes, hey, this ain't right, they're like, well, that's the law. So we just have to push back, just like on the free kill law. That the name of that sounds awful.
I know.
I just can't stand that. I basically would be a candidate in the free kill law. I don't have children, and my parents are both deceased, and I'm not married. So it's basically like, we can do what we want to you.
Yeah, that's
There's
exactly
no
right.
remedy, and that is not fair. That's not compassionate. I just almost can't believe that, but then I can. We're going into court and we're going to do the razzle-dazzle BS dance because that's what people do. Isn't that something? You want this dismissed and you did all this stuff. Of course you want it dismissed, but it's already done. And then that just adds to that. That's where, we are for the victims. We come from their point of view. Poor Miss Bryan, the fact that you took her husband's liver out and he died is insult enough. But now we're going through this. And that is why people get an attorney like Joe, because if the machine could still roll over her, they would.
That's exactly right. And just an update on that, Shaknovsky's also still being investigated for possible criminal charges by the Walton County Sheriff's Office. He was performing this procedure in Miramar Beach, which is over there in Walton County. So he's claiming, according to Zarzar Law, in his answer to the lawsuit, that Mr. Bryan was already dead by the time he mistakenly removed his liver. And he thought he was taking the spleen out to, quote unquote, help him live. So
Wait.
I asked for clarification about that. And Joe said, well, if you think about it, he's still under criminal investigation. So basically he's trying to say he was already dead, so he couldn't be responsible.
Of course he's going to say that. I mean, he didn't listen to any of the other 10 or 12 people in the room either. This is going to be very interesting because the nurses are being thrown under the bus with him. The other medical people in there being thrown under. Just wait. This all is going to have about 25 different stories. So I just say have at it because they're up against a tiger with Joe.
Absolutely. I agree. And we appreciate Zarzar Law keeping us updated on this lawsuit. We wanted to share that update with you, and we certainly appreciate his support of this show as well. And we do want to let you know that I have also reached out to Dr. Shaknovsky several times, including today, for comment on this case, but I've not heard back. Ascension Sacred Heart also does not comment on ongoing litigation. So we just wanted to let you know that that's what the latest is on the Shaknovsky case. And another quick update on a story that we've covered here on Gulf Coast Confidential. You remember the charter boat captain?
Yeah.
Old Brock Turner was just giving that poor kid an earful.
Yeah.
Poor old Gage. Well, Gage just showed him, you know, it's graduation season, got lots of kids graduating from high school. He's no kid. He's a young man, but he went and got his captain's license.
Right on. Well, now he's the best blinking captain in the United States of America or whatever. No, he's a doll. I love that little guy.
I know, me too. And we're proud of him and glad that he's doing well. And those are the kind of people we want to see behind the wheel of a boat out there on our Florida waters.
Right on.
Awesome. Well, those are those updates. Now we're going to turn back to our main story on Carlee Russell. And Pam, like I said, has really been following this one since it first happened back in 2023, around October. And essentially this young woman, you know, just perpetrated this hoax and ended up going to, you know, getting in trouble for it. She was criminally charged and tried and pled guilty. But, you know, we're going to break down what happened because a lot of people just didn't understand why. Right. Why would she do this? Right. Why would she fake her own kidnapping? Why would she lie about something this important, this scary, put her family through it, put the community through it. And it looks like it kind of boils down to a little bit of attention-seeking behavior.
A lot of attention-seeking behavior. And some other stuff, I reckon. It's got a whole lot of stuff I still don't understand. But we got a 25-year-old pretty girl. She has a degree in psychology. Her parents, when she graduated from high school, her parents gave her a black Mercedes, and she's currently driving a red Mercedes. She works at a little spa over in the Summit. That's the part of Birmingham that's we consider over the mountain. That's the beautiful mountains and iron ore and all that over there. That's a lovely side of town.
Well, that's interesting because that came up just last month, or I should say month before last now, because here we are in June. But in April, she was back before the court. Yeah. You know, basically they were doing a checkup on how because she was ordered to pay $18,000 in restitution to cover the search costs as part of her punishment for, you know, basically being found guilty of perpetrating this hoax. And so they were getting an update on it, and she talked about having this part-time job. I didn't know what it was, but she's paid less than $1,000 of the restitution to the city of Hoover that they say that she owes, which I thought was interesting. She's only paying like $50 a month, and the court was kind of annoyed with all that. They were like, you know, we get it. We work with people when they're trying to pay out of their own money, but she's got a part-time job. Maybe we just need to up it up a little bit.
Yeah.
You know,
and I'll tell you about how Nick Durzis, he's the chief of police in Hoover. You'll know him anytime you're in Hoover. He's the dapperest dressed man in Hoover over there, and he's just a real good man. So when he gets upset, people listen. At least I did.
Yeah.
But we got Carlee Russell, 25 years old, working on that side of town, getting off work about 8:20, and so she is headed to Tzatziki's. It's a Greek restaurant. I don't even think I said that right. Anyway, but it's a Greek restaurant right there at the Colonnade.
That sounds right, Tzatziki.
Yeah, right, it is. I can't say it right. I just know I like the chicken roll-up from there.
Yeah, I like tzatziki sauce. I like all sorts of Greek food.
So she went there to get some food after work. Well, while she was at work, she had taken a roll of toilet paper and a black thirsty robe, you know, like a spa robe. And so she goes to get her food at Tzatziki's, and she gets her mama something, she says. And then all during that day, she had been looking up stuff on her computer. She's like, how to take money from a register without being caught.
Oh, man, I never want to see my daughter Googling something like that.
Yeah, and this all happened in July. This was July the 13th. And then a few days earlier, she had Googled something, says, do you have to pay for an Amber Alert? So I'm going to tell you some of these other things. Yeah, this is interesting. So then she says Birmingham bus tickets. She looks those up, a one-way ticket from Birmingham to Nashville. And then on July the 13th, same day, she was looking at the movie Taken.
And getting inspiration, apparently.
I guess so, fixing to be that gone girl. So she goes there, she gets her little food from the Greek place, and then she goes to Target and she buys her some Cheez-Its and some granola bars.
Interesting.
So she's got that. All right. So now she's got all this stuff. She's headed home, and she's going down 459, and she said, "Whoa!" She sees a toddler on the side of the road.
Running down the side of the road. And she gives a lot of description.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if they're running or walking or whatever, but the way that she's moving, they're probably running, you know.
Otherwise, how could she have seen all that she claimed to have seen?
Exactly.
Now we know she wasn't telling the truth.
Right. She's in her red Mercedes, and they have the cameras of it where they show the whole video. And she's got on her hazard lights, and she's headed the way toward Tuscaloosa on 459. And so she calls 911, and she says, "Hey, I see a child on the side of the road." And they start asking her questions like, "Well, how old is he?" And she said, "Oh, he looks like a toddler, 3 to 4 years old." And then they said, "Well, does he have on shoes?" And she's like, "No, I don't think so." "And is he dressed?" "No, just in a little white shirt and a diaper." And she's saying she sees this. And the person on the phone with her, 911, is basically like, "Can you stay there and at least watch him?" Because all of us, when we first heard this, you get to thinking, maybe that's a lure or something to get a woman out of a car and go after a baby. I know I would probably jump out and do that and probably get taken myself, but that's just the part how I am. And I think that's how a lot of women are. But so they said, "Well, what's your name?" She said, "My name is Carlee Russell." You know, everything was just like a regular old sentence to her. She didn't say, "Help me, I'm scared, hurry up, can you believe this baby out here? Who's around?" You know, none of that stuff. It's very calm. So all that is happening, and the police get there within 5 minutes.
Wow.
The Hoover Police, which they're awesome. I had a friend, or I still have a friend, that worked as a Hoover police woman. And I mean, like, I love them. They're always helpful. You lock your car at the gallery, they'll even come help you. They might be mad at you, but
yes, they might be.
They do way more than that. But I'm like, you know, they just help people so much. So they're there within 5 minutes. But by that time, Carlee's gone. Her wig, her phone, her purse, her Apple Watch. I think her food, her Greek food may still be in there, but the Cheez-Its and the Nutri-Grain or the granola are gone. But she left her wig, and, you know, folks don't run out from under a wig.
No, no. I've watched a couple of documentaries that talked about that. Basically, the business in India where they cut their hair as part of a religious ceremony, but then wig makers will take that long, gorgeous, luscious black locks and they'll use it to make wigs that are especially popular among Black women and who, you know, I guess are looking for just a different style, if you will, but that they're extremely popular and it's like a big deal. You know, you don't want to get your real hair wet or you keep the wig on. But yeah, you're right. These wigs are valuable. They're important. That's a strange thing to do. Right.
And most of the time, if you've had one on, you're not going to just, as they say, snatch it off, you know, and keep going.
Right.
You know, so that's what they said, that the wig was there and the phone. And I would think, you know, you grab your phone or something. Anyway, it doesn't seem right. It's not right. But also on the picture or on the video, you can see what looks like maybe a silhouette of somebody getting out of the driver's side. So where does she go in just 5 minutes? That's what we want to know.
Yeah, and that's what's one of those ongoing mysteries, really, because as you break this timeline down, which I know we're going to do a little bit more, but when she does pop up, you're like, well, you know, and we're going to talk about that too, but it's kind of like she said she didn't have any help, but it does make you wonder, maybe there was somebody there who picked her up.
Yeah,
you know,
I think there was. I think there was. Well, so here she is. She's at 9:30. She's called 911, and the dispatcher's on the phone with her. And during the same time, right after she gets off the phone with 911, she calls her brother's girlfriend and is telling her this incredulous story. And while she's on the phone with the brother's girlfriend hears her seem like she's talking to the child, like, "Are you okay?" and et cetera, et cetera. But then the phone, she doesn't hear Carlee anymore, but can hear Carlee's car. By the way, her car is still running and the door's wide open when the police get there.
Scary.
So then she said she hears sort of like a scream and then nothing after that. Nothing after that. At 9:41, that's when the police were there and found the cell phone, purse, Apple Watch, wig, keys, everything. The police get
The
there.
Apple Watch has a tracker on it.
Yeah, and see, that was interesting to me too. You know, it's just all so crazy. But
And if you're kidnapping somebody, are you going to take the time to be like, well, leave that cell phone and that Apple Watch behind, you know?
yeah. So anyway,
away.
right, she was gone for 49 hours. And so when she's telling the story, you know, she finally goes home, and I'm going to tell you about that in just a little while, but she's taken by some man. He's out there mumbling to the toddler, she says. And so a man gets Carlee, forces her over a fence into a car. And then the next thing she knows, she's in the back of an 18-wheeler, and a man with orange hair and a bald spot is the one that put her there.
Weird.
Yeah. And she hears a baby, and she sees a lady. Well, guess what? She escapes again, but then she gets recaught by these people. So then back into a car, and then she's blindfolded and taken to a house and undressed.
Ugh.
So the next...
And she said they took pictures of her, right?
Right. They fed her cheese crackers, she said. I wonder if they're her cheeses, you know. And they played with her hair and painted her nails.
That sounds so ridiculous.
It's so crazy.
It almost sounds like a fantasy, too.
It does. It's
kind of weird.
A bad fantasy.
Yeah.
You know, not a good one. Well, she had escaped and then back into a car. Then she escapes again, running through the woods, and she pops up in a neighborhood.
Her own neighborhood.
Her own neighborhood. And then so she's walking through her neighborhood, and other people have Ring or security cameras, and they see her just kind of like sashaying, I guess, down through the neighborhood. But when she gets to her door at her family's house, she's panicked and anxious and, you know, going to tell them this incredulous story.
So she's geeking herself up for the act, is what it sounds like.
But when they found her, she had $107 in her sock. And she said the people didn't tie her up because they didn't want to leave indentations on her.
That makes no sense.
None of this makes sense.
How fast did police figure it out? How quick did it take them?
Well, I think it took a little while, you know, not a long time, but I still don't know what happened to her.
Because they had to take the time to verify and see, you know, if there was any. But yeah, from what I read, they went back, traced her steps to where she said she was, and they did not find any corroborating physical evidence at all to back up what she said.
Well, where'd she go? I mean, seriously, I'm trying to think. I take pride in keeping myself busy, you know, like a little busybody, staying busy. But 49 hours straight from like one night and then 2 days, and then there you are. In Birmingham, you would get seen. You had to be somewhere. So somewhere in this comes another, I guess, maybe story, lie, made up something. Something about a Red Roof Inn comes in that somebody said they saw her there. So her parents go over there and door knock. I don't blame them. They're knocking on the doors to find her, and so did the police. But she wasn't there either.
That's interesting. So it's possible she could have stayed at a motel.
She could have, or I mean, there's a whole lot of things, and I'm not saying I know how to do this, but I mean, we got our very own Gone Girl here, you know. So the massive search went on. It's all over social media, and they said at the beginning of this that her brother had got on TikTok and said, "Look, my sister did the right thing. She called 911. She's trying to get help." And I even had those feelings when that was happening. I couldn't sleep those 2 nights, and I wrote something on social media like, she didn't do anything wrong except follow her heart. I mean, she got me hook, line, and sinker because I was just upset about it because I was thinking, this is not right. None of it made sense. So we got a local, federal, and state folks looking for her. I mean, this is a big search.
Yeah.
The men and women were shoulder to shoulder with those orange and fluorescent vests walking I-459 and over in that area. So, I mean, they are grid searching like you search for like a bullet that got loose or something, you know? So where was she at?
I know. That's crazy. Well, and the police chief said that they spent a heck of a lot more than $18,000 actually on this search. And that makes sense.
Yeah,
just the sheer number of, you know, the man hours, the time, the effort to go back over what she'd said, not just looking for her when she was disappeared, but then when she came back, trying to figure out what happened.
Well, and then they had to put out posters and stuff missing, and the emotional duress that this put her family and friends and people. There was a lady that this had happened to her daughter back. Her name's Angela Harris, and her daughter's name is Anaya Blanchard. And it affected her. She even came to help look for Carlee.
Her daughter had been killed.
Yes. And this lady is so sweet. We're going to do her story later. But she had come to help because she said, you don't think about all the expenses that are necessary in this, like the $10,000 for a helicopter, or the fact that you need food and clothes and a hotel because this is happening somewhere. So anyway, she was in the mix. They had the best person to help. So all of this is happening.
And the family was all over the news asking for help as well.
Yeah, and as they should have been. And the Crime Stoppers was activated, and I think the reward had gotten up to $63,000 just in 2 days. So that all is going on. And then all of a sudden, 10:45 on a Saturday night, Carlee pops up.
She bebops back down the road.
Back to her house. Yeah, she's
not too
home.
frazzled till they see her.
No.
Then she starts to put on a show.
Right.
Sounds like.
And they have the paramedics or the EMTs or the medical people. She goes to UAB and she's in the hospital, and they basically are seeing what's going on. I don't think they kept her overnight or anything, but it was just a little short visit. So everybody's going, what's going on? Is there a toddler missing? Is there a psycho out here snatching women? Because I am from that area up there, and I have never, ever, ever, and I mean never, pulled over on I-459, I-65, any of those places in Birmingham, that if I have stopped and got out of my car, that some Alabama man didn't get out to help me.
Right.
You know,
Agreed.
that will never happen hardly. And then there were cars going by. So I don't know if she did get out on the driver's side or the other side. Where is she? I still want to know.
I agree. I know. And she's never said, right? She still claims she was by herself.
Right. And so now you've got Hoover Police. And I remember that day one after this, I was at work and I was looking at stuff, and Chief Durzis comes on, and they have a press conference at 1:00 because I put my phone right here and I'm typing and looking at scripts, and he was on there, and it was as serious as it could be. You know, scary. All of us were looking at it. So then we're just trying to see, okay, is this a human trafficking thing? Because, you know, Birmingham's pretty busy through there, and you can get through there and get on up to Atlanta and other places. So we're still looking at that. And I can tell he's not telling everything. It just seemed different, you know. He said, this isn't over yet, because we hadn't found her yet, obviously. But I don't think they told everything that they knew.
So maybe they were suspecting that this was a hoax that she had perpetrated before she even turned up.
Right, because some body language experts had been all over the internet and stuff going, she's not telling the truth. And there's like 3-year-old or 4-year-old, 3 is the liar's number. You know, and then they're like, none of that makes sense. None of it. The way that everybody's reacting makes no sense. So there were a few people that are like these body language people, and they're just calling her out on it. And I'm thinking, well, what if it is? You know, but they're not worried about that.
So interesting. Well, and so here she comes forward. Now she's saying that she'd been kidnapped. Police are starting to look into it. They're finding no corroborating evidence. Nobody else saw this alleged toddler running down the road. Nobody else saw her stop. Nobody else saw her, you know, with another individual. So she's the only one on this busy highway that sees this toddler. She's the only one that stops. Nobody else goes to help. And yet kidnapped by these people that let her get away once, get her again, then first of all, if they really existed, they're kind of crappy kidnappers.
I think they're kind of nice.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly. They painted her nails.
Yeah.
That does make me wonder, listening to her story, that what if there is any truth to any of that. It sounds like that's what she did. She ate cheese crackers, she painted her nails, just spent the past 49 hours grooming while the rest of the world was looking for her.
Right. And then I get to thinking too, did she do all this to divert some attention in another way she would have gotten? It has been said she wasn't doing good in school. She's kind of messing up at work. She had, if you look on her social media, and you and I talked about this, you look on her social media, it looks like it's like all these glamour pose shots and stuff. And actually one of them reminds me of like where Mary Tyler Moore like throws her hat, you know, in New York. It's
yes.
like, I'm Mary Tyler Moore. One of them looks like that. It looks like somebody had gotten up like for like something they're going to put out for advertising.
Yeah, when we were looking at her social media, if you go back, those pictures were posted not too terribly long before the alleged kidnapping. prior to that, they were just more regular photos, if you will. Just her in bed, hanging out with family, or did no makeup on, looking very casual, but they're more like in the moment, fun type pictures. And then when the ones that she posted were very prescribed, if you will.
Right.
They definitely looked like she had hired someone. One of them is her in like a sequined gown, and another one is her in her nursing coat, and another one is just sort of very, almost like resume type photos. Yeah. They're beautifully done. Yeah. She looks wonderful, but it definitely, in light of the lies, and you see that she's posted these pictures, it seemed like she certainly was planning this from the get-go to be some sort of a star. Like she thought this was going to make her famous. And it makes me wonder about her mental health or her level of intelligence, because I'm not saying she's dumb at all. I mean, I don't think that's the case. You can't do well in nursing school, but I guess whatever the case is, I don't think that she's unintelligent. It just seems like maybe naivety or, she had the character flaw, if you will, to want to lie and put everybody through this. Just for a little attention. But, you'd mentioned that there was a rough patch with her boyfriend, and now they're not together anymore. Right. He was, speaking out, trying to help find her. And then when she did come forward and everyone eventually realized that she had lied, and police were charging her for this, then he stood up and said, I don't agree with what she did. I'm hurt too. She lied to me as well. But please don't attack her. I feel like there's some problems, that need to be addressed. And I thought that was very generous of him. He knows the person behind the headlines, but his family did not do that either. They were there as they should have been, front and center, asking for the public's help, accepting the Crime Stoppers' help, accepting the public's help, and then all of a sudden they just clam up when they realized that Carlee had made this all up. And I'm not saying it's wrong. They didn't need to get back in front of the cameras and chew her out. But I think just to be respectful of all the time, energy, love, effort, prayers, money that went into looking for her might have been a good idea, in my opinion. But I'm not trying to pass judgment, but just to put myself in their shoes, I would have felt compelled to say something. And be like, this is not what we were expecting. We're certainly glad she's alive and unharmed, but we realize that this has inconvenienced, to say the least, a lot of people and caused a lot of heartache. And we're sorry for that. And we're just going to get to the bottom of it. Thank you for your privacy. Helping us.
Exactly. That would have been good. But the emotional shrapnel and the way that it kept going is because, if we have what's his name? Gussie Smollett, the guy that faked his own getting beat up so his career would help.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah.
And then there's sort of something that they call a duping delight. And she's got a degree in psychology. She can't be a dummy. She's got a degree from college. And so she would know psychology. But one of the other things they were peppering in there was maybe it's a schizophrenic break, because she is in that age group to where they say, well, that could happen there. But I'm not a psychologist or anything, but I mean, I don't know that it was that. To me, it seems like she was enjoying the duping delight that happens with that almost like John Lovitz on Saturday Night Live, the liar, he'll, that's the ticket, and he gets excited, and she's doing this and figuring all this out, went to Target to get Cheez-Its and granola bars. Well, she didn't get anything to drink, but, she had, and she said they're feeding her cheese crackers. So, and also the bigger picture of a lot of this is this crying wolf. What about the next young lady that goes missing? We're going to say, well, we got to wait 49 hours because folks can figure out what to do for 49 hours in Birmingham, Alabama, off of 459, where there's so many people. I still want to know, man, she needs to be running SWAT programs or, undercover stuff for people. But her family, they did ask for the privacy and stuff, but, it was such a different reaction, in my opinion, because, like you said, they clammed up, but then the next day they went on national TV and they said, yes, there's still an abductor out there and she's having to go through so much. Y'all need to back off and stuff, which nobody's saying we want people to come hard for her, but the truth needs to be told. The way I figure about stuff is whatever intensity you put it out there should be the intensity that comes back.
Absolutely.
Right. All this time, effort, money, concern, and love. And then here's a lady over here that's lost her child that's spearheading this for you and came here, drop a hat, bringing her own funds and stuff. It would only be civil and polite for them to say, and she did have to admit later that she told a lie, But still, where was she? Candace Owens, who's a political commentator type lady, and I don't listen to her a lot, but I listened to her on this. She said, I will pay the $18,000 to Hoover Police Department for Carlee Russell to come and sit with me and tell me where her was.
Yes, that's a great question.
Yeah, she said, I want to know, because she said, you don't leave your phone, your purse, your wig. Most all of us, if I thought somebody was going to get me, I'm at least snatching my phone,
Definitely.
something.
So
and
they
I'm
can
not,
track you.
Right, and I'm not just going to go off with you. So the man with the orange hair and the balding spot and in the back of the trailer and making her get naked and blindfolding her and hearing a baby there. I mean, we need to know what the happened. I want to know.
I know. Well, I thought it was interesting too that they're, based on the reaction of the community and just, I think people felt so betrayed, and I don't know. Hopefully this won't be a common thing, but they're ready if it is.
Yeah.
If somebody were to try it again, they've actually passed a new law that is inspired by this hoax, and it makes it a felony to fake a police report, as well as allow law enforcement to seek larger amounts of restitution. 'Cause like I said, the police chief said they spent a lot more than $18,000, and here she is just plunking down $50. They said she's making regularly making the payments regularly, but it's not near the dent that it needs to be making. So they were talking about making larger payments or whatever the case may be. But I can't imagine anybody wanting to do something like this again.
No, I can't either, unless that's worked for them before. You know how I always say this, people do what works for them. Maybe some of this little extra prefabbing, Pinocchio Joe, as I call it, flim flam rim ram stuff has worked for her before. People do what works. But also she had to tell that she did not see a child, she did lie, and instead of her doing that at the beginning, like on July the 24th, her attorney comes out and says that she made a quote-unquote mistake there. And I really...
A mistake.
Yeah.
A mistake by lying to everyone, a mistake by, which part was the mistake?
Yeah.
That's a nice way of saying she's just a liar.
Right. Well, this is what Chief Durzis is so upset about, because our system has allowed all this to happen. It's made a fool out of them. They had to stop doing other things.
Real crimes they were investigating.
Exactly. To do this. And like I said, the emotional part of it, I don't want that to go unnoticed or something. You can't put that back, what people would feel. A lot of people have 25-year-old daughters that go over to the Galleria or work at the Summit. No need to make all that happen. But she finally pled guilty on, it was in 2024, March of 2024. And she, on April 22nd, just not too long ago, that's when Chief Durzis said, hey, quit getting your nails done, get you another job, sell something. I want you to pay this. But I also figure if people are trying, if it's the best they can do, but I don't think this is the best she can do.
No, I don't think so either. Well, I mean, she didn't mind posting about how good she was doing in nursing school afterwards, and there's nothing wrong with that. We certainly want her to continue on and live her life and be a productive member of society, and a nursing job is a great way to do that. Your mom was a nurse. But, going back to the pictures that she was posting prior to this whole escapade, one of them I thought was interesting. She was, it's that one of her in the sequins dress, and I think she's with her boyfriend. It's a different sequins dress. But anyway, she's dressed very nice. She's with her boyfriend, sipping a glass of wine, and basically writes a little something like, quote, too classy for this world. I'm that girl.
Oh my goodness.
She seemed to think, and there's nothing wrong with that. Again, I'm all for high self-esteem. Put it out there, girl. If you got it, flaunt it. But in light of everything that she did, and if this was just one big giant cry for attention and to get the notoriety that apparently she feels like she deserves, that takes on a new meaning to me. I'm like, well, you ain't that classy, baby.
That's right. Don't be doing
Liars
that.
ain't that classy,
Yeah, and do you realize what just happened? I think that's what it is. I don't know that she realizes how big a deal this was and how this has undone a lot of stuff, because there are a lot of ladies, there are a lot of 25-year-old girls that are saying, you doing this, people aren't going to believe me when I say this.
Absolutely.
If it happens. So you've done some harm. I'm of that thing, the silver lining of this law that makes it a felony. That's one thing. But, what would be wonderful, in my opinion, nobody asked me, is for her to say, put a mea culpa. I did this. It was wrong. I was wanting attention. And she could help so many other young girls that are like, this is not the way to do it. You know, there are so many things. She has a degree in psychology. You can go talk to a psychologist. Her parents didn't seem like the kind of parents that are going to beat her to death because of this, that, and the other. But look at this. She's created such a chaos of her life when she could have just go to her parents and go, Mom and Dad, I've effed up, or whatever it is. Or at her work, I shouldn't have done this. I need to pay the consequences and move on. She caused a lot of damage.
She really did. Well, it's a fascinating story. And I'm glad that you broke it down for us and followed along on that timeline. Because I remember the time that it happened. And then, I didn't follow it as closely as you did. But when she lied, I was like, holy cow, why would somebody do something like that? Yep. But, I still feel like it's still a bit of a mystery. Because like you said, maybe somebody did help her. Maybe there was a plan and all she had was her snacks. She knew she was only going to be gone 2 days.
I think 49 hours worth of snacks, at least for me, it ain't right there.
No way.
So, and the thing is, too, I want to know. She needs to tell somebody. I don't have to know, but somebody else needs to know because this still makes no sense to me.
All right. Well, we'll keep an eye on it, see what else comes out. Thank you, Pam.
You're welcome.
We appreciate you joining us. That is it for Carlee Russell Kidnap Hoax, 911’d and Invisible Toddler. We appreciate you joining us here on Gulf Coast Confidential. I'm your host, writer, and producer, Molly Barrows, with co-host and researcher, Pam Hill. And a big thanks, as always, to our director, editor, and production engineer, James Roy. And remember, you can listen to more of our Gulf Coast Confidential conversations wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And you can also watch on the Gulf Coast Confidential YouTube channel. Just don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you next time. This episode is brought to you by Zarzar Law.